So for this next session, we're going to welcome the Embraer team, who were a founder partner of Aviadev back when we started in Kigali in 2016 in a side room at another conference. They've supported us every single year since, so that's 9 years in a row. Their African footprint continues to grow with many of their operators here in the room and at the event this week. Now this year, what we're going to offer is something completely fresh, which I know will appeal to everybody here and provide some food for thought and discussion over the coming days. The Embraer team have worked on a brand new report. We've put this together over the last year, which is going to be unveiled for the very first time right now with a global press release. This is the first time this has been shown anywhere in the world, and it's all about Africa. So I would like to invite Theo to come up and take us through. Theo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Thanks, John. Good morning. Thank you. Well, as John said, I'm Theo Wensink. I'm the head of marketing for Middle East and Africa at Embraer. And I insist on the Middle East and Africa because for the past 6 years, I was working across the EMEA region. And I'm so excited to be dedicated to Middle East and Africa since January. This region is so exciting. This is where I started when I joined Embraer. And I can really feel the energy and the buzz in the room since this morning. So super happy to be here today to present the Embraer Connectivity Report. This is a report we've been working on over the last 6 months. And the idea here is to take you through the report, give you the highlights, and at the end of the session, you'll have a QR code which you can scan and where you can access the full report. But before starting, I would like to show here the quiz, please. So we have a quiz for you today. Excellent. So the idea here is if you can guess how many intra-African markets of up to 5,000 kilometers and excluding domestic are currently not served with a direct flight and would have potential to have around minimum two weekly flights with a 100-seater. We'll get to the results later if we can go back to the presentation. When I think about connectivity, the first thing which comes to my mind is my trip to St. Helena last year. After the Aviadev conference in Namibia, I took the chance to go to St. Helena. And the reason I'm bringing this now is because it is during this trip that I really realized for the first time how essential connectivity and aviation can be for certain communities. For those of you who don't know, St. Helena is an island situated in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean between the west coast of Africa and the east coast of Brazil. It's a really tiny island, and the only way to get there for centuries was by boat from Cape Town. And the journey was 5 days on the boat. But now, for a few years, there's a direct service with Airline from Johannesburg. And while on the island, I could really feel when talking to the islanders, the saints, how they call them, how relevant this unique air link is to the island. Because the post is delivered, so it's the link to the rest of the world. Note also that until 3 years ago, there was no internet on the island. Second, doctors and the hospital depends on it. And then I was amazed to see how at the pub over the weekend, everyone is discussing who's coming on the flight, who's leaving the island. The flight is really the center of the island. So this is really why I understood how key connectivity is in some regions and for some communities around the world. We talked about connectivity, and in the end, connectivity, as I said, is about connecting people. There's a very interesting metric to evaluate connectivity and how people travel, which is the propensity to travel. And this is a graph essentially showing the trips per capita relative to the GDP. And what you can see is that in Africa, there is still a big potential to grow. And this is mostly driven by 3 factors. First of all, population is set to increase. As we saw in Daniel's session, we have big growth rates on the continent, both in terms of GDP, in RPK. Second, population is still very young. Many of people haven't traveled, so there's a big boom in air travel, and we're going to see how this is going to increase over the next years. And then finally, the growing middle class. So these are the ones who travel the most, and we all know in Africa this is growing considerably. Next week at Paris Air Show, we're going to be publishing our market outlook, and we're forecasting for the Africa region a growth of 4.4% in terms of RPK for the next 20 years. And this is more than regions like Europe or North America. So big growth potential on the continent. And we usually talk about potential, but I think it's also important to recognize all the amazing things which have been done here on the continent. I mean, on the flight here, I was just reflecting about this, and I was thinking how airlines like Ethiopian Airlines were the first adopters of the 350 in the continent, and even globally. It's also a region where we have a lot of very powerful hubs with passengers connecting from one place of the world to another through Africa. And also, it's a region where digital payments, all the digital domain is very evolved, and other regions are learning from Africa. So there is potential, but we also have to recognize all the good things we're doing here in the region. So what can we do as an industry to capitalize on this potential and to support this development? We see, and we would like to focus here, and this is what we're focusing on the report, it's two main pillars. The first one is opening new routes, so markets which are not served. We saw in Daniel's presentation that only 19% of the markets are not served with a direct flight, so there's a big potential there to open new routes. And the second aspect is in existing routes to increase frequencies. So we're going to start with what are the opportunities in terms of new routes. But how are passengers flying today? Because if there is a potential, this means passengers still need to fly and they go through other routings. I've selected here two cases which are in the ranking you will see in the report. The first one is Cape Town to Lagos. Currently, between these two countries, there's only 4 weekly flights between Johannesburg and Lagos. No direct flight between Cape Town and Lagos. Currently, there's about 50 passengers per day each way on this route. And now most passengers have to transit through Luanda. That's about 9 to 10 hours route versus a 6 hours direct. Similar duration when connecting through Johannesburg. And some passengers even connect through Addis. That's good for some of us in the room. But I think most passengers would rather go in a more direct way. And a second example is, I think, even more extreme, is the case of the route from Antananarivo to Moroni in the Comoros Island. That's a roughly 1 hour segment, but there's no direct flight at the moment. Most passengers go through Nairobi. That's, in the best case, about 7-8 hours. Some also have to go through Addis. So we really see how the connections are not always efficient, increasing security, increasing costs for travelers, and also we talked about this a bit, but also increasing emissions. So with more direct flights, we could make travel more affordable, reduce security, and reduce also connecting times, because one of the challenges also is reducing connecting times at hubs, as we're going to see later. When opening a new route, because this is what everything is about, it's important for an airline to estimate how many passengers they can expect to capture on this new route. There is a lot of literature out there talking about stimulation models, factors, but everything is usually centered on more mature markets. We're very happy to present in the report a stimulation curve which we have developed at Embraer, focused on the intra-African market. So what we've done is we've taken data from the last 10 years, and we've looked at every single market which had been opened in the following year, and we compare by how much the traffic grew. So each of the dots you're seeing there is a new market which has been opened within Africa, and by how much the traffic grew. So based on that, we can then do a graph, which gives us a good estimation of the stimulation factor. For example, for a market which is currently not served with a direct flight and has about 10 passengers per day each way, once an airline opens a direct flight, based on historic data, we could expect to increase, to multiply, this is a multiplier factor, the total passengers per day each way by 3 to 4. So you just need to read there on the chart. And this, important to note, only considers local traffic. So the potential is actually greater when you consider connecting passengers through the hubs. And we really want to give you, airlines, this tool to help you estimate, together with all your internal analysis, the potential of the new routes. And together with my colleagues here at Embraer, we'll be happy to further discuss this, this model. We can share with you the data, and yeah, we're looking forward to discussing this with you. Before going on to the next slides, which is the ranking of the top 10 routes, I would like to maybe see the results of the poll. Let's see. So, okay, he's saying 83 markets. Well, the answer is actually a bit low. It's 45 markets. So we have identified 45 markets within Africa who can sustain at least 2 weekly flights with a 100-seater. The full list is on the report, and here, in essence of time, I would like to go through the top 10 routes. I will not go through each of them, but I would just want to share a few thoughts. So, these are the top 10 markets which we have identified with the most potential in Africa. 3 important assumptions. These are routes up to 5,000 kilometers. So roughly 5 to 6 hours flying range. Second, these are routes which are not served in 2025. And then, third of all, the ones you're seeing here, the top 10, based on our modeling, on the stimulation modeling we've done, which you've seen previously, these can sustain at least 3 weekly flights. So the top 3, Abidjan, Douala. Second, Lusaka, Cape Town. Third, Dakar, Libreville. You're seeing the distance, and then in the last column, the current passengers per day each way. And with the stimulation model, we were able to estimate the expected passenger, and based on this, together with spill models, and we can estimate how many weekly flights we could fill, in an efficient way, of course. I would like to bring your attention to the fact that there's many routes in West Africa, and this is something I will come back to later. At the end of the session, you'll have the QR code. In the report, for each of the top 10 routes, we are giving you some insights into each route, both from the macroeconomic level, but also from the airline and aviation industry level. So this has been the result of a lot of work together with the Embraer team, and we hope this can really help you airlines in the room identify new markets which are imminent, and also important to realize that currently there is no airlines flying this route. So if you open a route, you're going to be in a monopoly. And what best to be in a monopoly? That's where you can make most money, but also at the same time, you serving your customers with a direct service. We talked about opening new routes, and in complement to this, another way to enhance connectivity on the continent is to increase frequencies on flights which are already served directly. This is obviously more focused on hub carriers, as we're going to see now. In the report, we're also presenting a hub benchmark. So what we've done, we've looked at different hubs around the region, but also globally around the world. And we've looked at basically what's the average number of frequencies per destination for each of the hubs. These are on routes up to 4,000 kilometers. So really the feeder flights. First of all, I would like to highlight the great job that many of African carriers are doing. As I said in the introduction, we have really strong hubs here on the continent. Airlink in South Africa, Ethiopian in Addis, but also Kenya Airways or Egyptair. So these are really strong hubs which we need to recognize their relevance not only at the regions level, but world level. Everyone around the world knows these airlines. As you will see in the report, when we look at these numbers for hubs around the world, the typical global leading airlines deploy between 2 and 3 daily flights on each market per destination. So this is a number to have in mind, which provides good connectivity in a hub. We all know that now many passengers, as we saw before, have to connect through other airports, but in many cases even through European and through Middle Eastern hubs. So we have very strong hubs in Africa. We need to capitalize on these increased frequencies to capture all these passengers which otherwise are flying with Middle Eastern or European airlines. And I'm sure all of us in this room have faced this situation. Last time was a few years ago. Between 2 North African countries, I had to connect through Paris because there wasn't an afternoon flight. So more frequencies, more options for passengers. And I think also, as we talked about profitability, the more frequencies you give to passengers, the more options they have, and this typically attracts business passengers who are the ones paying the higher yields. They can go in the morning to a meeting, come back in the afternoon. That's convenience. They're ready to pay for that, and that's where you can make money also. But obviously, with what aircraft are we going to do this? So these are 2 pictures which I took in the past 3 years of flights to and from Africa and within Africa. And we mentioned in the previous panel that very often the flights are half empty, and we can see this very often when flying narrow bodies, with load factors not being that good and impacting profitability. So it's not just about connecting the cities, but also in an efficient and profitable way. And don't get me wrong, narrow bodies are very good for certain routes, for trunk routes, but there's many other routes which we've seen which don't have the demand for these bigger narrow bodies. And this is where and why aircraft size is really the key enabler to hub connectivity. You will see in the report that for most of the airlines around the world which have great connectivity levels at their hub, they all have what we would call small narrow-body regional jets. So these are really key to feed the hub. So this is a very simple example to illustrate the idea. We could have similar capacity, either 1 flight with a narrow body or 2 flights with a small narrow bodies, improving frequencies, connectivity at the hub. So this is a picture I took when taking off from St. Helena. And reflecting on connectivity again, when leaving the island, I was really feeling how important our industry is to connect people and connect population. And this is, in the end, what the DNA of Embraer is. Embraer was founded more than 55 years ago in Brazil by the Brazilian government. Brazil was a poor country at the time, but the government had a vision for the country and realized that they had to connect it. It's a very big country. And the options out there in terms of aircraft were mostly big planes, which were produced by American manufacturers, European manufacturers, and the Brazilian government wanted to build an aircraft which would enable people to move within the country and to connect small cities around the country. And this is how Embraer was born, with connectivity as its heart, connecting small communities and bringing people together. When leaving St. Helena, I was very emotional, and I was very proud to work, first of all, for Embraer. On St. Helena, I was shocked how everyone knew Embraer. I live in Amsterdam, and very often people ask me, where do you work? And many people, I'll be honest, don't know about Embraer. What's this? But on St. Helena, everyone knew about Embraer. Even the priest, and I was so surprised at the pub having some pints of beer with the priest. He knew more about Embraer than me. He was telling me about some news I hadn't heard yet. So I was really proud of working for this company. And just to illustrate this, my visit on the island deserved me being on the front page of the newspaper. So this was really something big. But I think most of all, I'm very proud working in aviation, bringing people together, and this is what connectivity is about. I hope this session gave you a good overview of the report. You can now scan the QR code. You can access the full report, and we'll be happy with my Embraer colleagues to discuss and explain to you how we achieved this report and what are the key outcomes. So thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to discussing with you during the break.